say sometime before 2018, Seiko did not have very many limited edition watches available, especially like numbered limited edition watches. Every once in a while you would see one here or there, but around that time, they hired this new executive from one of the big Swiss watch manufacturers. I recall reading the article and I vividly remember that he was being hired onto Seiko to create limited edition watches. This was his vision of how to increase Seiko sales moving forward. And boy, did he live up to his word. I've tried a few different times to Google that article and find it and figure out what his name was, but I haven't had any luck. Anyway, fast forward 5-6 years later, and here we are. It seems like every Seiko is a limited edition, and frankly, that's a complaint amongst a lot of the watch community in recent years. But before 2018 or so, that wasn't the case. And back then, they made some pretty cool limited edition watches, like this one, the Seiko SCVE045, the Nano Universe collaboration that you see here today. And what makes this watch extra special? It's a numbered limited edition. What's also interesting is this is the third time I've actually owned this watch. All different numbered ones too. So out of the 300 roaming around the world, I've actually had my hands on 1% of them. How funny is that? So before we continue on, two things. If anyone remembers or you can recall who that executive was that Seiko hired years ago to make all these limited edition watches, or even if you recall the article, please go down in the comments below and let us know. Second thing, obviously, this watch is not available for purchase any longer. My channel is called the Three Hand Hunter channel. I spent a lot of my free time hunting for specific watches that I've found interesting over the years, and I hope you can appreciate that. And hopefully, these videos can open your eyes to different watches that you may not have known about in the past. And if you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that bell icon so you get notified when a new video pops up, which usually is every few weeks or so. And comment down below if you've had any experience with this particular watch. I know I'd love, and I know we'd love to hear your experiences as well. So this is one of the rarest Seikos that I own. Is it the rarest Seiko out there? Hell no. But I've had a few other Seikos that I would consider kind of rare. Like, for example, this titanium quartz analog, but also digital LCD watch. I believe these watches were manufactured for about a year, and the red dial that you see here being the most obscure of the bunch. But don't worry, I'll do a review of this watch as well. Anyway, let's talk about this limited edition Nano Universe Pilot watch. Now you'll notice, and you probably noticed, I said Nano Universe. And Nano Universe is a clothing company in Japan, something like that. They're kind of like an Abercrombie and Fitch here in the USA. And they've been known to do collaborations with Seiko over the years. They have many Seiko collaborations in different models. If you search Seiko Nano Universe on eBay, you'll see what I mean. But what I didn't tell you earlier about this watch here is even though I've owned the stainless steel variant of this watch 3 different times, I actually owned the PVD or ion-plated version of this watch as well. It was actually the first one I owned since it was the most common, and there was the most dial variations at that time when I learned about these models. And like I said, the PVD or ion-plated version came in all sorts of dial variants, and each one of those variants had a run of 500 apiece, all individually numbered. The stainless steel version that I have here was only 300 pieces, and this is the only dial variant of the stainless steel, which makes this watch very special, and really the most sought after version. So let's talk about the dimensions of the watch. The watch comes in at 42.5 millimeters. It's 12.5 millimeters thick, and it has 20 millimeter lug widths. The lug to lug distance is 49 millimeters. 5 or 6 years ago, when this watch was released, there seemed to have been a lot of pilot watches in the 42 millimeter range. And that was the lower end. Most came in closer to 45 millimeter. That was the norm for most pilot watches styled just a few years ago. And this Seiko was released before the trend of smaller watches really started to appear more mainstream from manufacturers. But for a pilot watch, this watch is very wearable. And on pilot style watches, you expect more of a dial since there's no dive bezel, which gives you better legibility as a pilot. So at 42 millimeters, Seiko has great legibility, and it's also very easy to wear. Now around the same time, 2017 or so, Zenith released the Type 20 pilot watch, which was very popular at the time. And as you can see, the font on the indices of the Seiko watch is very similar. And I remember at the time when this watch first came out, it was like the affordable version of the Zenith Type 20 watch. But the problem was, it was a limited edition and also a JDM or Japanese domestic model, so it wasn't readily available. So even if you can afford this one, it was really kind of difficult to get your hands on it back then. Let's take a closer look at the dial. You'll notice that the indices are all applied and they're filled with the lume bright. The application isn't as good as like you would get on a Seiko diver, but it still glows really nice for a pilot watch. The dial itself is black, maybe a dark gray, and you could really pick up the micro texturing on the dial in direct sunlight. Also, the Seiko logo is beautifully applied. You'll also notice there's a white date window at the 6 o'clock. I really wish the date window was framed, but because Seiko put a lume marker just below the date window, from afar, it looks nice and it almost looks like an indice at the 6 o'clock, which keeps the symmetry of the dial quite nice. The sword style handset is appropriate for a pilot's watch, and the second hand is a needle style. The tip of the second hand is painted in red. If you take a close look at the top of the dial above the 12, there's a nice small red triangle, which is a nice touch, giving the little pop of color to the dial. If you look at the case finishing of this watch, we have polishing on the sides with brushed surfaces on top of the lugs. The bezel has these facets, but they're all brushed. The crown is a push-pull crown. It's very easy to manipulate. Inside the watch is the 4R35 movement, which allows for hand winding and hacking. This particular movement in my watch is running extremely accurate. Matter of fact, I think it's the best 4R35 I've ever owned, which is actually saying a lot. Take a look at the case back. You'll notice it says Seiko, limited edition, 4R35, made in Japan, and the number of the limited edition, 100 meters of water resistant, and it has that little anti-magnetic symbol, which I think is great, especially for a feature for a pilot watch. But what's really interesting about the case back is it's a see-through display, but it's in a very dark smoke gray color. In direct sunlight, you can actually see the 4R35 movement with the Nano Universe logo printed on the inside of the display glass somehow. I don't think it's on the outside of the glass, which I think is pretty cool, so it's not going to rub off. Speaking of the glass, let's talk about the crystal. Unfortunately, this is a Hardlex crystal on the front of the watch. If you ask me, this is the biggest downside of this watch. So for me, I only tend to wear this watch out on special occasions versus being a daily beater for that one reason. You know, I'd hate to scratch this crystal and have to try to find a replacement on a watch that's not very common like this. Now you see this is the original strap and buckle that came with the watch. And here's the original packaging. Obviously, I don't wear it on this watch. I never have. And I never even did on the other versions that I've owned over the years. I always swapped out the strap. But the lugs, they have drilled lug holes for easy strap changes, and I definitely take advantage of that. Check out how different this watch looks on all these different straps. Now, as I told you before, I hunted for this watch. And if you're patient, you can find one for sale. But you have to be diligent and persistent when you're hunting down a particular model. At the end of 2023, one popped up on eBay and it was sold. But it sat there for sale for a couple of months. You can see it right here when it was sold. I found this one that I have in my hand on a watch forum. And being a watch hunter and looking for specific models, for me, it's the most fun part of this hobby. I know many of you need that immediate gratification. You see a watch, you want to run out and you want to buy it immediately. Yeah, I get that feeling too. But I also love the hunt. I really enjoy this part of the hobby. I find a watch that I want, a model that I'm hunting for, and it may take me weeks, months, and in some cases years, but I love it. And I'm sure some of you as well. It's kind of crazy, right? Well, if you made it this far, let me introduce myself. My name is Blake, and as you can tell, I'm a bit of a watchaholic. And I'm assuming if you made it this far in the video, you're a watchaholic too. Hey, thanks for spending your time with me, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video.